Hey friends, welcome back. Today I'm going to read chapter 32 of Ken Schoolin's book, The Adventures of Jonathan Gullible, a Free Market Odyssey. Today we're celebrating again. Last night we had the nomination of the Libertarian Party presidential candidate Jo Jorgensen, and today she has a running mate. Spike Cohen will be running with Jo for vice president. Interesting pick, I think. The two are from different generations and will appeal to different generations of liberty-loving voters in this election. Okay, chapter 32, The Suit. If we're victims, we're not responsible for what we do. And if we're looking for someone else to be responsible, lots of us turn to the government, where good intentions can lead to some pretty outrageous results. John Stossel. John Stossel, who was the moderator for the final Libertarian candidate debate the other night. I can remember, hope you don't mind a few reflections before I start the chapter. When I was in my first high school teaching assignment at Fritz, Texas, up in the Texas Panhandle, I found a VHS tape of a John Stossel in the Classroom is what it was called. And it was John Stossel who was teaching the lesson at least one day in my class each semester that I taught up there. I wonder if I still have that tape. I bet I do. I don't know how to look at it anymore without any VHS players, but it'd be interesting to find a way to look at it or to put it on DVD. All right, chapter 32, The Suit. Seeing their leader, George, head for the door, the other men in the corner picked up their briefcases and followed close behind. "Number 2, said George. "Explain that problem of liability to me again, would you?" George wanted to show Jonathan how well his lawyers performed. The whole bunch marched rapidly down the hall with George's arms still slung around the necks of both Number 2 and Jonathan. "You see," said Number 2, "the metal piece may fly off the stick and hit some bystander, so we have to protect you and the other investors." "Protect me if the metal piece hits someone else? Whatever do you mean?" said George, feeding questions to the lawyer. "The injured person might sue you in court, trying to get you to pay for damages, lost income, trauma, legal fees, etc., etc." The group practically stepped on Jonathan's heels as they tried to stick close to George. For the knee walkers in the group, the pace was especially difficult, but they muffled their groans and consoled themselves with the thought of year-end tax returns. "A lawsuit could ruin me," said George, pretending to be alarmed and watching Jonathan's reaction out of the corner of his eye. Number 2 continued, unaware that he was performing on cue. "So an ingenious new idea has been enacted by the Council of Lords to absolve you of personal responsibility for losses suffered by others." "Another new idea? Who owns the letter patent on that?" said Jonathan innocently. Number 2 raised an eyebrow, then proceeded, ignoring Jonathan's question. "We file these forms and put the letters LPR after your company name." Without missing a step, Number 2 struggled to unbutton a folder to withdraw a stack of papers. "That reminds me, Mr. Selden, please sign on the line at the bottom." Jonathan was fascinated. "What is LPR?" he asked, stumbling a little to keep up. "LPR means limited personal responsibility," said Number 2. "If Mr. Selden registers his company, the most he can lose to a lawsuit is the money he invested. The rest of his wealth is safe from victims. It's a kind of insurance the council sells for an additional tax. Since the council limits the risk of financial loss, more people will invest in our company, and they'll pay less attention to what we do." "At the worst," commented George, "we can shut down the company and walk away. Then we start another one under a new name. Pretty clever, huh?" In that instant, George's eye caught sight of a stunning young woman coming down the hall. She had more curves than some thought should be legally allowed on a public street. As he turned to watch her pass, George tripped and tumbled pell-mell, jamming his perfectly groomed fingers into the wall. Ow! He cried in agony, his arms and legs sprawling in every direction. He tried to raise himself up from the floor and complained of a sharp pain in his hand and lower back. His lawyer swarmed over him in a frenzy, exchanging words frantically. A few helped gather items that had fallen out of George's pockets, while others busily jotted notes and drew diagrams of the scene. I'll sue, yelled George, holding his bruised and bloody fingers in a silk handkerchief. I'll crush the stinking lout who's responsible for this obstruction in the floor. And you, young lady, I'll see you in court for causing my distraction. Quick as a flash, several lawyers darted over to the woman, calling for her name and address. Shocked, the young lady purred haughtily, Sue me? Do you know who I am? I don't care, said George, glaring. The bigger the better. I'll sue. Trembling and fighting to control her anger, she countered, You can't do that. My boyfriend, Carlo, that's Carlo Ponzi, she repeated for emphasis, says my beauty benefits everyone, that it's a public good. He declared it so. He told me last night. Instinctively, she reached into her purse to find a mirror. What she saw displeased her. Her eye makeup looked smeared. Now look what you've done to a public good. Carlo says that everybody should pay for public goods. He always puts my cosmetics on his expense account. Well, you'll be sorry. Your taxes will go up because of this. She stuffed the mirror back into her purse and stormed away in search of a powder room. Feeling some sympathy for the woman, Jonathan asked, Are you really going to sue her? How can she be blamed? Ignoring Jonathan, George crawled along the floor looking intently for a protrusion, evidence of negligence on someone else's part. He stopped at an indentation and screamed, That's the cause. Number 2, find out who's responsible. I'll have his job and every penny he owns. And what's that female's name? Calm down, George, said number 2. That's Ponzi's girl. Forget her if you want to repeal the tree workers' law. However, this building is palace property. With the Lord's permission, we can sue the taxpayers. George smiled broadly and exclaimed, Number 2, you're a genius. Put it on the agenda for Tweed. Of course, the Lords don't care if we sue the palace. The settlement money won't come out of their pockets. We'll even see that they get a share. He wondered how much Lady Tweed would exact from him for this behavior, or for this favor. George's pain was fading rapidly. This gives me a chance at the deepest pockets of all. You'll ask the Lords to pay for your injury? Asked Jonathan. No, you idiot, retorted George. The Lords have the ultimate LPR. No, they'll hand the innocent taxpayers to me on a silver platter. I'm going to collect big time. And that is the end of chapter 32. Chapter 32, The Suit. Well, I'll see you back here tomorrow for chapter 33, Doctrinaire. I enjoyed reading you chapter 32, and I hope you're enjoying the book. We have, I think, about 8 chapters left. Well, have a great evening. Good night.